His $50 million deal was about to go up in flames. His baby wouldn't stop screaming. And the solution came from the one person in the room everyone was trained to ignore. A person his world was designed to look past, to render invisible. What happened in that restaurant wouldn't just save his fortune, it would force him to confront a truth about himself, and the world, that he had spent his entire life avoiding. Section 1, The World of William Sterling. William Sterling didn't just live in the world, he commanded it. His name was a headline, a brand, a synonym for ruthless success. From the top floor of the gleaming Sterling Tower, he ran a global empire built on a killer instinct for market weaknesses. He was a man who understood numbers and spoke the language of profit and loss. His life was just a long list of victories, each one proving his core belief. That with enough money and enough power, there wasn't a problem that couldn't be solved or a person who couldn't be bought. His personal life was pretty much the same. His wife, Catherine, was as elegant and polished as the marble lobby of his skyscraper, a beautiful asset who understood her social duties. And then there was Emma, his daughter. 6 months old, with bright blue eyes and a grip on his heart that was both new and terrifying. He loved her, of course. But he loved her like one of his prized possessions, a legacy, a continuation of the Sterling name, another perfect piece in his perfect life. He treated fatherhood like a new business venture. He'd hired the best nanny in the country, a woman with a PhD in child development. Emma's nursery was a technological marvel. But for all the money he threw at it, William felt a deep and frustrating disconnect. When Emma cried, he'd look to the nanny, to the tech, to anything but his own 2 arms. He didn't know how to give her real comfort, and this small failure gnawed at him. That frustration was buzzing under the surface on the most important night of his quarter. This wasn't just another business dinner, it was the final play after 6 months of tough negotiations. He was meeting with Japanese investors, old-school titans of industry who cared as much about respect and good omens as they did the bottom line. The deal was worth $50 million, but to William, it was worth more. It was a legacy deal. The setting was perfect, Lucille, a restaurant so exclusive it didn't even need a sign. Everything was under control. The menu was set, the wine was breathing, the view was breathtaking. He had left nothing to chance. But he forgot one variable, the one thing his power couldn't tame, the simple, unpredictable cry of a baby. Section 2, The World of Linda and Victoria. Miles away from the rarefied air of Sterling Tower, but in the same city, lived Linda and Victoria. Their world wasn't measured in stock prices, but in the ticking clock of a double shift and the hum of a fridge that was never quite full enough. Linda was a waitress at Lucille, and a great one at that. She was always on time, always precise, and had a quiet grace that let her handle the fragile egos of the city's elite. Her smile was part of the uniform, an armor she wore to hide the bone-deep exhaustion of a single mom fighting a daily war against bills and rent. Her life was a constant dance of sacrifice. She woke before sunrise to get her daughter, Victoria, ready for school, worked through lunch and dinner, and got home long after Victoria was asleep. It was a life lived in the shadows, all for her daughter. Victoria, at 12, was the center of Linda's universe. She was a kid who grew up in the quiet corners of her mother's life. After school, she'd take the bus to the restaurant and find a forgotten booth in the back near the kitchen. There, she did her homework, understanding with a wisdom far beyond her years that their life depended on her being silent and unseen. But Victoria saw everything. She saw the weariness in her mother's shoulders and the forced brightness of her smile. And from her quiet corner, she studied the world. She had a rare and powerful gift of empathy. Stray cats would come to her not for food, but for a gentle, calming touch. The younger kids in their building, when hurt or scared, would run to Victoria, whose quiet humming could soothe tears better than any bandage. This gift was just who she was. Their bond wasn't built on what they had, but what they shared. Tonight, like most nights, Victoria was in her booth, a book open in front of her, a silent guardian of her mother's world, about to collide with another one. The door of Lucille spun, dropping William Sterling, his wife Catherine, and baby Emma into the hushed, expensive air of the restaurant. The clinking of crystal and the low murmur of powerful people formed a symphony of status. William looked around the room, satisfied. Everything was perfect. Linda approached their table, her face a mask of professionalism. "Good evening, Mr. Sterling, Mrs. Sterling." She pulled out Catherine's chair, her eyes avoiding direct contact. William gave a short nod, already scanning the room for his guests. He barely saw her as a person, she was just part of the expensive machinery he'd paid for. A few moments later, the Japanese investors arrived. Mr. Tanaka, the elderly head of the group, and his two sons bowed with deep, formal respect. The pressure in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. The investors' faces were polite, but their eyes were sharp, missing nothing. As Linda poured the first glass of water, a small, fretful sound came from the high-tech bassinet. It was Emma. Her face started to crumple. It began as a whimper, a tiny complaint. Catherine shushed and rocked the bassinet, her movements stiff. William shot a nervous glance at his investors, his smile tightening. The perfect symphony he had composed had just hit its first wrong note. Section 4, Rising Action, The Unraveling. That first whimper was just the warm-up act. The main event was a full-throated, lung-busting scream that tore through the restaurant's quiet atmosphere. Baby Emma was inconsolable. 1 minute stretched into 5, then 10. The carefully planned conversation about business died completely. The investors tried to talk over the noise, but it was impossible. Their polite smiles became strained masks. Mr. Tanaka kept glancing from William to the screaming baby, his expression unreadable. William felt a hot flush of panic, followed by pure anger. This wasn't supposed to happen. He switched into problem-solving mode, but none of his usual tricks were working. He pulled out a silver-plated rattle. Useless. He shoved his $1,000 smartphone in front of the baby's face. Emma only screamed louder. He called in the nanny with a fresh bottle. The baby angrily rejected it. The situation was spiraling out of control, desperation turned to humiliation. He could feel the eyes of the other diners on him. William Sterling, master of the universe, couldn't quiet his own child. In a moment of pure madness, he waved over the manager. "I'll pay for their meals," he hissed, gesturing to the tables closest to them. "Pay them to leave. Now." The manager, Jean-Pierre, looked horrified and scurried off, not to bribe guests, but to put more pressure on his staff. He found Linda by the service station. "Do something," he whispered frantically. "This is a catastrophe. This is William Sterling. You have to fix this." Linda froze. What could she do? The absurdity of it all was lost on the panicked manager. From her booth, Victoria watched it all. She didn't see a billionaire or a $50 million deal. She saw a stressed-out father, a helpless mother, and a miserable baby. She felt a deep pang of empathy, a pull so strong it was almost physical. She slipped out of her booth and went to her mother. "Mama," she whispered. "I think I can help." Linda's heart pounded with terror. "Victoria, no. Go back to your seat, please. You know the rules." To interfere was unthinkable. She could be fired on the spot. "But Mama, she's just scared," Victoria insisted, her eyes wide and earnest. "Listen. It's not an angry cry. It's a scared cry." Linda looked from her daughter's compassionate face to the train wreck at the Sterling table. The deal was dead. What more could she lose? The manager's back was turned. In that split second, Linda made a choice, not as an employee, but as a mother who trusted her child's heart. She gave a tiny, almost invisible nod, and Victoria walked toward the table with a quiet purpose. As she approached, a new kind of silence fell. Everyone, diners, waiters, chefs peeking from the kitchen, was watching this small, black girl in a simple dress walk into the heart of the storm. William turned, his face a mask of fury, ready to explode. "What in God's name do you think you're doing?" The words were on the tip of his tongue. But he never said them. Because Victoria didn't look at him. Her entire being was focused on the red-faced, screaming baby. She didn't offer a toy or make a silly face. She just stood there for a moment. And then, she began to hum. It wasn't a known lullaby. It was a low, soulful tune passed down from her grandmother, who'd learned it from her own grandmother. It was a sound that felt like warm hands and soft blankets, a sound that spoke directly to the soul. It was pure, unselfish, and full of love. The effect was instant and incredible. Emma's screams faltered. She stopped, mid-wail, taking a shuddering breath. Her tear-streaked face turned towards the sound. Her little body, which had been stiff with distress, started to relax. Victoria, still humming, began to sway gently. Emma's cries softened to whimpers, her wide, wet eyes locked on Victoria's calm face. The whimpers faded. A moment passed. And then, a sound no one had heard all evening, a small, happy gurgle. Then a hiccup. And then, a tiny, bubbling laugh. The entire restaurant seemed to be holding its breath. The Japanese investors stared in open amazement. A small smile touched Mr. Tanaka's lips. Catherine, the mother, had tears of relief streaming down her face. And William Sterling, the man who moved markets with a single phone call, was frozen solid. He looked from his laughing baby to the calm 12-year-old girl who had just performed a miracle. In that moment, everything he believed about power and wealth shattered. A problem his money couldn't solve had just been fixed by something he couldn't measure, pure empathy. The tension finally broke when Mr. Tanaka let out a warm, genuine laugh. He said something in Japanese to his sons, who nodded and smiled at William with new warmth. The conversation, once dead, was miraculously alive again. They talked about family, not contracts. The $50 million deal wasn't just saved, it was stronger, sealed by a moment of shared humanity. William was still trying to process what happened. But before he could even say thank you, the manager, Jean-Pierre, stormed back into the scene, his face red with fury. He didn't see a miracle worker. He saw a waitress's daughter who had broken the rules by interfering with a VIP guest. He went straight for Linda, who was standing by the service station, her heart caught between pride and fear. "What have you done?" he hissed, grabbing her arm. In front of everyone, he began to humiliate her. "Are you insane? Letting your child bother our guests? This is a business, not a playground. This is completely unacceptable." Linda flinched. The pride she'd felt moments before vanished, replaced by a cold, familiar dread. "She is banned from this restaurant during working hours. Do you understand?" the manager continued, his voice rising. "You're lucky I don't fire you on the spot." He was making an example of her, reinforcing the invisible walls that separated the servers from the served. The fact that her daughter had just saved the night was irrelevant. She had broken the rules of her place. Victoria saw her mother's pain and rushed to her side, taking her hand. Linda, trying to hold back tears of shame, began to apologize. "I'm so sorry, sir, it won't happen again, I'm so sorry." Her words were the conditioned response of a lifetime of taking the blame. William Sterling watched this ugly scene unfold. As reality came crashing back in, it hit him like a physical blow. The woman and child who had just saved his reputation and his deal were being punished for it. He saw the manager's cruelty, Linda's terrified submission, and Victoria's quiet, wounded defiance. For the first time, he was truly seeing the brutal mechanics of the world he helped create. The invisible walls were suddenly, shockingly visible, and he realized with a sickening lurch that he was on the wrong side of them. Section 7, Resolution, a different kind of investment. Something inside William finally snapped. It wasn't the anger of a thwarted billionaire, but the cold fury of a man waking up. He pushed his chair back, the scraping sound echoing in the silent room, and stood up. Every eye was on him. Jean-Pierre stopped his rant, his mouth hanging open. William didn't walk towards his table or the investors. He walked directly toward Linda and Victoria, placing himself between them and the manager. He looked Jean-Pierre dead in the eye. His voice was quiet, but it carried across the room. "You have just publicly humiliated the two most valuable people in this restaurant tonight," he said. "You have shown a catastrophic lack of judgment. You have not only insulted them, you have insulted me and my guests." He then turned his back on the manager, a dismissal more powerful than any shouting. He crouched down to get eye level with Victoria. "I don't know how you did what you did," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But it was the most incredible thing I have ever seen. You have a gift, young lady. A remarkable gift." He stood and looked at Linda, and for the first time, he really saw her. He saw the exhaustion, the fear, and the fierce love for her daughter. He saw her strength. "Madam," he began, the word filled with a respect he'd never offered a service worker in his life. "An apology is not enough. Frankly, this place doesn't deserve you." He paused, an idea forming in his mind. A decision made with his heart, not a calculator. "My company has a charitable foundation. It has millions of dollars, but it lacks a heart. It's run by people like me, who understand numbers but not people. I believe you do. I'd like to offer you a position as a community outreach director, to help us find real ways to help families." Linda stared at him, speechless. He wasn't finished. He looked back at Victoria. "And for you," he said, a real smile finally reaching his eyes. "The world needs more people with your kind of wisdom. The Sterling Foundation will set up a full scholarship, in your name, for your entire education. Any school you choose. All the way. Consider it an investment. The best one I'll ever make." This wasn't just a billionaire writing a guilt check. It was a fundamental shift. William Sterling, the man who collected companies, had just invested in people. The deal with the Japanese investors would be signed, but the most important transaction of the night had already happened, an offering of dignity, an investment in kindness, and the quiet understanding that the greatest wealth is seeing the humanity in others. CTA, if this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe for more stories that remind us of the good in the world. Conclusion: in the end, it wasn't the billionaire who saved the day. It was a young girl who simply saw a crying baby, and a mother who was brave enough to trust her daughter's heart. It's a powerful reminder that true wealth isn't in what we own, but in what we give. It's not in our power, but in our empathy. The most valuable things in life can never be bought.